All right, hello everyone. Happy Mental Health Awareness Month, the month of May. And I wanted to start off with this. I actually pulled this from the Mental Health America site, which they're the ones who started the whole mental health awareness movement. And it's interesting. I think there's been an evolution in this over the years. As I said in my email to you, mental health, I think typically the connotation is, and mental health awareness is around the treatment or the prevention of, raising awareness around mental health disorders, conditions, illness. And actually, I was kind of surprised. And I'm gonna, Deborah, if you want to mute yourself,
Am I
get
not
some
muted?
get some feedback there. So you should have it. Okay, there you go. So I was actually kind of surprised, but I love the approach that they're taking. The theme of this year is where to start, mental health in a changing world. And so you can actually go to their site and read more about this. They've got some great resources, but uh, as they put it, the world is constantly changing for better or worse. It can be overwhelming to deal with everything going on around you. While society is getting more comfortable about discussing mental health, it can still be hard to know where to start when it comes to taking care of your own well-being. And I think that's very common, for a lot of folks. These are somewhat tricky things at times when we're dealing with our own thoughts, our own emotions. It's maybe not as cut as dry as our physical health, where, there's tons of information out there. You can do a diet, you can exercise, but when it comes to mental health, it becomes a little more challenging. And so I love, Mental Health Awareness Month. I think it's much needed. We do need awareness, prevention resources for folks dealing with more severe mental health conditions. So they say start with learn how modern life affects mental health with new resources. Act by building your coping toolbox for managing stress, difficult emotions, and challenging situations. And then advocate to improve your own mental health, but also for your friends and family and community. So love this. Yeah, again, Mental Health America. You can go there, check their website out. And so because this is, May, the Mental Health Awareness Month, I did want to throw a quick disclaimer in there that, this is not about, and I'm not here to discuss just mental health disorders and illnesses. And um, if you or a loved one are, dealing with or suffering from a mental condition, please seek help. Go to a professional. I am not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist. I have certainly dealt with my fair share of clients that have their, whether it's anxiety disorders, eating disorders, depression, even. And the approach that I take and the tools I use have been shown to be very effective. But if it is a severe condition, medication and professional help can help immensely. And there's no magic pill. So, my metaphor is medication can be a great life preserver. If you're drowning, you need a little help. Medication's great, again, for these severe conditions, but you also have to learn how to swim as well. And the data shows that medication in conjunction with therapies like cognitive behavioral therapy is the most effective, when you pair the two together. So, and there's this ongoing debate in psychology where the question is it chemical imbalances that are responsible for, these mental health disorders and conditions? Or do certain thought patterns lead to the chemical imbalances? And I want to hear from you. What do you think, or what's your current perception of it? What have you been taught? What's your guess? And again, feel free to open your mic, type something in the chat box. Deborah, what do you think?
I do not take medication. I think that I personally think that diet, exercise, and meditation are my forms of medication personally.
For sure.
I don't, yeah.
Well, on this question of taking medication out of it, do you believe that it's chemical imbalances are responsible for disorders like depression and anxiety disorders and things like that, or do thought patterns lead to chemical imbalances, do you think?
Ooh, that's a very hard question, and I am not a scientist or a doctor. I wouldn't know, but I do think that I don't know if it's a chemical imbalance, but like your mental thoughts and your mental attitude are can definitely be changed to a positive outlook, or more positive, even that's the right word, but more
Yeah,
productive, or like less feeling as if you have a illness. Yes, I definitely think that words and thought patterns can contribute to health
awesome.
for the
And
unconscious too.
right. And you are correct. And actually it's a trick question because it's a little bit of both, right?
Yeah.
And it's still kind of unclear. We don't exactly know. There's no real proof, but yeah, certainly people can be born with certain chemical imbalances. Chemical imbalances can certainly lead to these mental health disorders and illness, and it can be the other way around where certain ways of thinking, habitual ways of thinking and feeling, lead to a chemical imbalance. So again, it goes to show that yeah, medication can help with those more physical challenges like chemical imbalances, but also we need to work on our mindset. We need to work on our thought patterns to foster more, create better balances of all these hormones that are going through our body, whether it's dopamine and serotonin, and those can be triggered by, to your point, Deborah, exercise, meditation, but even just the very thought process that's going on changes the processes in the brain, literally. And so that's my approach to this. That's what I specialize in. How do we change our mindset? How do we create what I'm calling this mental fitness, right? Mental fitness. And for the vast majority, who don't have a diagnosable mental health disorder, and for the most people watching this or in our community, they're not here for that. They're here for how do I continue to improve my experience? How do I continue to improve my life? The thought patterns are the main culprit, or in my vernacular, what I like to call the mental software that's running. It's the programs and patterns contained in that. And so, what do I mean by software? Well, here's the hard drive, right? This 3 pound bag of fat cells, water, microamperages of electricity called your brain. We've got this amazing machine, right? It's got amazing processing speed, processing millions of bits of information a minute. It's able to make quick decisions. It reacts, right? It's got virtually unlimited memory. So this incredible hardware that we've got, and just like your computer or your phone is running a certain piece of software, Windows, 11 now for PCs or iOS for Macs, the software is the interface, right? How we're working with the hardware. And so you look at this picture, it looks complex, right? We've got all these algorithms, equations, each one performs a certain function. Uh, just like the computer, your mind behaves very similar. There's a certain software that's installed onto the hardware, and there's very specific equations that perform specific functions. And so how this translates is, if this happens, then I think this way, I feel this way, I act this way. I can, I can't. I will, I won't. I up to this point, but not past this point. Where you're afraid, where you're hopeful, where, maybe you're not sure. And when you take action versus not, or not now. And, what you understand and don't. These are all equations that are embedded into the software. And we get this very early on in life. So, you know, it's programmed really since birth by our family of origin, which for most people, that's the people you spend the most time with in the first 5 years of life, where traditional psychology will call your personality, um, your traits, right? Latest in neuroscience calls it your neural patterns. And so they both agree at which that is pretty much installed or wired in. And it's around the age of 5 and modified slightly by life experiences. But that base software is pretty much wired in at an early age. And that's pretty fascinating when you really start to think about it, that a lot of the things that we wrestle with, have been in place for a very long time. And to my point in one of the emails, we're mostly unconscious of it, so 90% of these processes, these equations, these thought patterns are happening in the sub and unconscious. We're not even really aware. And that makes sense when you think about things like, if I were to ask you right now, do you feel your right big toe? Right. Well, okay, now I feel it. But a second ago, before I asked you, right, you weren't aware of it. But your body, your mind is acutely aware of what's going on all the time. And it's regulating all of these physical processes. And that serves us, right? We don't spend energy thinking about digesting food. We don't think about how we're regulating temperature. So it serves us well, and it can not serve us if some of the things that are happening or the challenges you might be experiencing, like stress, anxiety, depression, which we're going to look into, um, a lot of that comes down to unconscious processes that are happening, these equations that are running in the software. And so, how this software operates really comes down to three things. It's constantly doing this to process information. What does this experience, this data point mean for me? And then I assign a feeling to it. Well, if this is something bad, then I don't feel good, or I'm fearful. If this means something good, I feel good. I feel hopeful. And then we take action as a result. So that's really, if you were to break this all down, how the mind is working. What does this mean? How do I feel? What do I do now? And then we create strategies based on these equations, where you procrastinate versus where you take action, where you decide to change versus stay stuck, what your standards versus your compromise are. Just to name a few, there's strategies we use to deal with life, right? Just as Mental Health Awareness or Mental Health America said, constantly changing environment, things are happening. How do we manage that? How do we deal with life circumstances? So, what you think and what you believe, plus how you feel, leads to the actions or not, which is ultimately is the results of your life. And then we'll tell a story to make sense of it all and tell us what's going on here. So the question, today always is, what if we told a new story? What if we changed how we thought about and talked about what's happening to us? What could happen? Would that change our reality? So mental fitness, as I'd put it, what does that even mean? And physical fitness, right? We have things like strength, cardio, endurance, energy levels, fat percentage. Maybe we have these metrics that we track, and how that really translates into mental fitness is like, well, how mentally strong are you, and what does that mean? What does resilience look like psychologically? How much mental endurance do you have? How well are you performing at work? Even in exercise, right? The mind is very powerful, and our physical health as well. um, and fat percentage, may the metaphor might be, um, you know, what's the fat we can trim from our psychology? What's weighing us down? Old belief systems, limiting beliefs. How do we become lean with our psychology? And what this looks like is how we deal with challenges, how we manage difficult emotions, be it sadness, anxiety, stress, right? How we manage stress is huge. And we're going to get into that a lot here because that's one of the main factors that affects our mental health. And so, all of this is if we're practicing, if we're working on our improving our mental fitness, it leads to more elevated levels, consistent levels of happiness and fulfillment. And, we feel confident. It improves the quality of our relationships and our love. We communicate more effectively with others, and our professional performance increases. So, and by the way, if you want to go really deep with this, it leads to even more spiritual components. How do we access higher levels of consciousness? And some other people might call that your intuition, or this deep knowing, finding answers within. All the answers are within yourself. And do you have that resolve? Do you have that confidence? Are you able to know exactly, how to manage your own challenges, how to find the solutions for you? Yeah, mental fitness really allows you to access even higher levels of consciousness within yourself. So that's how I'm framing mental fitness here. And so, how do we go about doing that? Well, first question, again, in this idea of what's controlling what? Is it the body controlling the mind controlling the body? And do you believe that the mind and body are hardwired? Is there an intimate mind-body connection? Because by changing the body, can we affect the mind? And by changing the mind, does it affect the body? What do you think? Let me know.
I'm a yogi, so I definitely believe in the mind body connection. I think they're interrelated. So, how your body feels can directly affect how your mind feels, and kind of vice versa. They go hand in hand.
Absolutely. Deborah?
Well, I actually want to go back a little bit to when you pushed the
Yeah.
picture of all those like what goes is on inside your brain and the algorithms, I think you called it maybe.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like
Equations.
the equations, like this when you put that up, I was like, I feel like this is my brain all the time. And
Yeah.
it's like jumping from one thing to another, and sometimes like my brain, and this is like a personal belief that I think that I'm never getting the equations right. And so they're not flowing together necessarily. Or like sometimes I feel like that. But then if I am mind and body and in the positive mindset, then it does feel like one equation just leads to the next and leads to the next and they all flow.
Yeah.
That makes any sense. But yeah,
Absolutely.
when you put that up, I was like, oh, this is my brain. Like it's just bouncing from equation to equation to equation all the time.
Yeah. And I don't think that's I think that's very common, right? That's why this picture's so great, because it can feel like this. Like this, if you were to maybe take stress and put it into a what does it look like? It's like all over the place, right? But you do have those moments of clarity, right? You do have those moments where it's cohesive and the equations lead to the right answers, right? And so I
Yeah.
would say even in those moments where it doesn't feel clear, your brain is following the programs, the algorithms that have been contained in it. And that's going to make a little more sense as we look at stress and actually like what's going on and how do we manage those states of feeling out of sync or out of control or stressed out, right? How do we manage that? So and I think I heard you say, but yeah, when I'm exercising, when I'm changing my body, it also that leads to even greater mental clarity and fitness for you.
Yes.
Yeah. So
Where it doesn't
absolutely
matter
agree.
if I get the equation right or wrong.
Yeah.
There doesn't have to be a right or wrong to it. They're just the equations and how, like to your point, how it's happening.
Yeah, and so I agree with both of you. The mind and body are one. They are not inseparable. Um,
Right or wrong,
yeah,
there doesn't have to be a right or wrong to it. They're just the equations and how, like to your point, how it's happening.
yeah, and so I agree with both of you. The mind and body are one. They are not inseparable. And so one of the very first things you can do, ironically, for improving your mental fitness is improving your physical fitness and changing your physiology. Doesn't necessarily mean, exercise, which is great. We absolutely want to do that, or practice yoga. Um, those are excellent tools for changing your state of mind. But we also know that just by changing simple physiology, simple things like if you're slunched over in your chair, you know, you're looking down, well, what's the state of your mind, right? It's going to be different from if you hold your chest up high, if you sit up straight, and even more if you, I don't have the picture here, I guess, but if you put a smile on your face, that literally changes your brain chemistry. It changes your mood. There's a great study done. They took depressed people and they had a control group, which they didn't do anything with. They had a group that they put on antidepressants, and they had a group that they gave instructions. All they had to do was smile for 200 times a day. So literally, they'd be looking in the mirror. Okay, 1, 2, 3, and they did this over the course of, I think it was a few months, maybe 6 months. And they went back and they looked and they compared these groups. And what they found was, well, I'll ask, what do you think? Out of the three groups, who do you think had the most elevated levels of happiness over the course of that? The people who were smiling 200 times a day, taking the antidepressants, or the control group? And because I'm talking about physiology here, yeah, it was the smiling group. So literally putting a smile on your face, changing your physiology, changes the mindset, changes how you feel. And so the more you can utilize your physiology through exercise, even meditation, through making a point of smiling, you change the physiology, you can override the mind. So that's a great place to start, being conscious of your physiology. And one of the interesting things is, well, this is like a tool in our system here. If we have someone that maybe wrestles with bouts of depression, or feeling down, and they come into my office and they sit down in their chair and they're like, I don't know, I'm sad, I'm depressed, I don't feel good. And then I interrupt them and say, hold on, wait a second, can you sit up in your chair? And they're like, okay. Put your head up. Okay, put a smile on your face. And they're like, okay. Now tell me about your depression. And they might go back into the physiology. No, 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 wait, sit up, smile. What you find is it's virtually impossible to talk about being sad when you change your physiology like that. So it's a very powerful tool, just using your body, because they are so intimately connected. Now, stress, something that we all deal with, and this is one of the most common precursors for all sorts of things. It leads to anxiety, can lead to depression, post-traumatic stress disorder, even. Maybe people turn to self-medicating, are addicted to, maybe it's alcohol, drugs, to deal with stress, and even physical disease, right? We know this. This is, many studies have been done on this, that stress gets stored in the body and it can manifest as physical disease. you know it it it's cortisol is the main hormone for this, that elevated levels of cortisol it's like if you were to rev your engine, and it's parked at 100 miles an hour, you're revving it up, and you don't stop, well, you're going to blow your engine out, and that can wreaks havoc on your body when you're experiencing chronic levels of stress all the time. And but there's a positive, or there's a benefit to stress for us. It's that fight or flight response. It is pretty much hardwired into the body, because when the caveman was running away from lions and tigers while he's trying to hunt, like, the stress can get you to take action. The stress it makes you alert, it makes you more aware. It even maybe triggers some adrenaline. And so the question is, what do you equate as stress today? What do you record that as? It's not the tiger for the caveman anymore. None of us are running away from life-threatening tigers anymore. But what triggers that fight or flight, or now they call it, they've added one more, freeze, fight, flight, or freeze response. What triggers that for you today? Traffic? Is it people that you deal with? Is it little stuff? Just big stuff? Really becoming conscious of what's triggering this stress response. And then what strategies do we use to manage that, to manage our stress? Do we blow up on a spouse? Do we self-medicate, as I mentioned earlier? Do we just shut down? Or, on the flip side, maybe strategies you're already using today. Do you meditate? Do you exercise? Do you go be in nature? There's very resourceful ways of managing our stress. But how much of us really make stress about our potential greatness and joy? Why not? Why wouldn't we make it like that? One of the challenges with stress, because if you look at, let me scroll down here, how we talk about stress, because we use it so often, we talk about it so often, it's very common. We're all living, stressful lives at times. And I pulled this from the dictionary, a state of mental or emotional strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And we look at the thesaurus, the synonyms of stress: anxiety, apprehension, dismay, distress, fright, nervousness, strain, tension. Are any of these half full or positive? No, right? There's a very negative connotation with stress, with how we think about it today. And think about how loose we use it. Hey, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm just so stressed. I've got all these things going on. And because we are so focused on language here, because language is revealing the software, the equations that are running, do words just mean what they mean, or do they mean what we say they mean? And what I mean by that is, when you talk about stress, is it distressful? Is it half empty for you? Or, because there's two types of stress, distress, which is the more common version of it, that's Latin for, bad stress, stress we don't like. And then there's eustress, which is Latin for good, positive, good stress. Well, what does that mean? Good stress. Well, when you go to the gym and you exercise, you're putting stress on your muscles. And it's not the first 10 reps, or the first 9 reps rather, of, you're doing curls. It's that last 10th rep that, you're doing violent cellular strain to the muscle fibers, to the cells, in order for the muscles to grow back stronger. That's the only way you build muscle. You have to break down to build back up. And so just by changing how we think about, how we talk about stress, is stress just bad? I don't want stress. You know, I don't like stress. It's just all distress. Or what out of the things, in the last slide, what we record as stress today, which ones are you stress? Which ones are positive? Which ones do we want? And we know that, the positive of stress, we have so many metaphors of this. A diamond, just a piece of charcoal that handled stress exceptionally well, right? Or the hottest fire forges the strongest steel. And or the butterfly and cocoon, the butterfly creates this cocoon for itself, or I should say the caterpillar creates a cocoon for itself, and it goes into this very dark, sticky, it liquefies itself, it transforms, and then in order to, fly, it has to squeeze its way through a tiny little opening in the cocoon to wring out all of that stickiness, that goo. That's a very important point of the transformation process. It's going through massive amounts of stress in that transformation in order to fly. So we have all these examples and metaphors, and it makes sense, when we hear these. But again, do we pay attention to how is this stress serving me? How is this helping my growth? Or is this, again, half empty? Is this something I don't want? And I'll give you another big tool that we love to use here. So in the 10% of life, where it's challenging, it is stressful, we're being tested. That's really all. I mean, it's just the 10%, most of life, or 90%, it's flow, it's easy, we're going through the motions, we're doing good. But the 10% where we're challenged, that's really where we grow. It's where we learn. It's where we're, like I said, being tested. And you want this. You want that stress, because if you don't have that, if you're not being challenged, well, by law, you don't get the growth. You don't get the lessons. So if you change the perspective, if you look at this as, is this moment actually serving me here? What wisdom and experience am I gaining? Or this is my opportunity for my greatness, maybe. This is where I get to show up, not as old me. And so let me take a step back here. When we look at these in the 10 moments, what typically happens is we will revert back to something that's comfortable, something that's safe. And what I call the old you, the 5-year-old version of you that was installed. You manage stress a certain way, you handle challenges a certain way. When we're confronted with these in the 10 moments, we'll revert back to what we know. But we don't get the growth in those moments if we're using the same old strategies. It's in the 10, if you show up as new you, or better yet, this future you, this greatest version of you, the very best of you, and it's an opportunity to try a different strategy, to show up differently. That's where we grow. I mean, it's easy to be greatest version of in the 90%. We're not being challenged. So again, to think about these stressful moments differently and start to reframe, think about this differently, it totally changes the entire experience of stress. Now let me go back here. My next question for you, which would you prefer? So anger management, when you think about typical anger management, you might go to a class, you get certain coping mechanisms, strategies for managing anger. And in that kind of setting, on your very best day, you get less anger, right? Worst day, you get more anger. in that kind of approach. But what if I were to change this or change the focus? What if we made it serenity management? What if your focus is on, instead of my best day getting less anger, what if I get more serenity? On my worst day, I just get, less serenity. Out of these, what would you choose? Which program, would you want to opt for if I gave you these two options? Right? It's pretty straightforward, common sense. Yeah, more serenity. Serenity management sounds better. So this is not about let's just manage stress, but now how can I, maybe serenity is not the right word, but peace management or confidence management. It changes the focus entirely. And so stress is not what happens to us, but it's our response to what happens. And our response is something we choose, right? It's not the person's fault or traffic's fault, right? Or anything else that is creating stress today. It's how we choose to respond to this, how we think about these kind of data points. And do you believe this? If you had this belief, if you ran this thought that I will not stress myself out about things I can't control or change. And it sounds nice, right? Yeah, I get that, but kinda, but that'd be nice. But come on, I mean, really, that's really hard to do. And but stress actually sharpens me. Stress, helps me avoid the things that I don't want or the pitfalls. Right? It actually, we almost become addicted to stress because we think it's serving us, and so on. And think about, again, what you say to yourself and as you're talking to others about your stress. Is it half empty? Is it half full for you? And so again, this is all contained in the how we start to talk differently about our stress, changing the thought process, changing the mindset around it completely changes everything. Now, stress, very intimately linked, one of the precursors of anxiety, something that we all experience at some time or another. And I pulled this, my trusty AI friend gave me this great definition: emotion that involves unpleasant state of inner turmoil and feelings of dread over anticipated events. Some symptoms: trouble concentrating, heart palpitations, sweating, rapid heart rate, feeling out of control. Maybe Deborah's example, the equations all running and it's, feels scattered. Um, they're one of the most common mental disorders in the world. And they really do interfere with our daily experience, how we interact with others, our performance at work. And so causes, well, they actually don't really know. It's a whole mixed bag of things, right? It's very different for everyone. For some people, it's chronic stress. For some, it's dealing with change or uncertainty. For some, it's money. So many different examples that trigger this anxiety pattern for us. But in short, it's really just a worrying about a future unwanted event or things happening. And why do we do this? What would be the value of stress? Just as stress for our ancestors helped them be more alert, help them be more aware, there's a positive benefit for the strategy of anxiety because it it makes us aware of the possible things that can happen, right? If we worry, if we think about what could happen, maybe we can do our best to avoid those things from happening. And where this really came from, it's the classic don't spill the milk tool, one of our favorites. Let me just check the chat box real quick. Serenity, okay. Deborah chooses serenity management. Where anxiety patterns really originate is you think again that child, but in that first 5 years of life, they're being wired in, and the parent says to them, "Hey, little bride, don't spill the milk." In order for the brain to process that, you have to think of ways to spill milk in order to avoid doing it. So you hear spill milk. Oh, I could knock the pitcher, knock the glass over. I could slip out of my hands. I could trip and fall. And because we're really good, our brains are really good at answering those questions or following those commands, and we'll overachieve and we'll think of worst case scenarios. Like, a meteor can come through the ceiling right now, rip the pitcher out of my hands. Now I have to worry about meteors now. But here's the irony of that. The command is well-meaning. You don't want that thing to happen, but that type of imagery, right? The cognitive process that's going on is actually raising the probability that it'll happen, and it'll make it harder to pour carefully, which becomes the flip side of this. If you say, "Hey, Bri, pour that milk carefully, just get the milk in the glass," totally changes the cognitive structures, the processes that are happening. Okay, hold with two hands, pour slowly. And I'm not worrying about meteors. My thought process is all about how do I just get the milk in this glass? So literally by a command change, a sentence change, you're changing what's going on in the mind. And so where we see this is if don't spill was the form of the command, not just for pouring milk, but for many things. You fast forward, you take that person, they're going into an important business meeting. What are they likely thinking? Don't screw this up, right? Don't say that, or don't piss the boss off. Oh, don't do that. That's bad. And again, if that's what's going on, if that's all you're thinking about, what are the odds, right? What are the chances of those things occurring if you're not focused on the success, if you're not focused on what you want? So changing the command, huge, huge. Don't spill the milk is, if you do nothing out of this webinar, but just change don't spills to pour carefully, it'll drastically change everything for you. And here's another thing I want to, add to this. When you think about, taking this child and you say, would you ever tell a child, okay, in order to create success, what we got to do is we got to worry about all the possible bad things that can happen. And we got to be aware that we got to think about all those things. And then we do our best to just avoid all those worst possible case scenarios from happening. That's how we're going to create success here. Would you tell a child that? No, it seems kind of silly, right? When I put it like that. But then the child says, but wait, what if the thing that we're worrying about doesn't happen? And then you say, oh, that's the beauty of this strategy. It's because we worried so much and we put all this stress and anxiety in our bodies that thing didn't happen. Right. And so it gets reinforced over time. We think, oh, because I worry, because I stress, that was the reason it didn't happen. When in reality, a lot of the things we imagine, because they are exaggerated, our brains do a really good job of imagining those scenarios. They rarely happen, or maybe 1 out of 10 times, right? Does that really bad thing happen? But again, going back to that scenario, it sounds, it sounds kind of off, right? You wouldn't tell a child. What you would maybe want to say is, no, we want to picture what we want. Hey, what do you want to have happen? What does it look like? What does it feel like? How does it, what are the steps to get there? What's in our control? How can we influence this differently? How can we pour carefully? It's totally changes everything. So, and in this anxiety conversation, I'll leave you with one last great quote or picture quote, whatever you want to call this thing. If you can solve your problem, then what's the need of worrying? And if you can't solve it, then what's the use of it? Right? Because some things are out of control. You know, why? What would be the purpose? What would be the use of flooding our body with cortisol and harmful, stress and anxiety, and even just sacrificing our own mental health, our peace for things we can't control? And if you can solve it, well, if we're thinking about not spilling, that's not helping. So we focus on, solutions. We focus on what we want. And that changes everything. So any questions so far? I've got a couple last tools, or really one last big tool that is, I think, a game changer. It's one of our top tools. But any questions and comments on stress and anxiety? Is this making sense? Is there any challenges with it? And Crystal, I did see that you joined us, so welcome. I know you joined in a little bit late, so hopefully you're following everything all right. I don't think you missed too much, so. Got someone typing. I can feel it relax in my body when I change the frame of the wording. Yeah. Again, you'll be surprised just by changing our language, how we're talking about things, changes the physical feeling of it. So, last big thing, our top tool, and this applies to everything. I mean, we're focused on stress and anxiety because those are kind of the main challenges we deal with in this conversation of mental health. But this applies to all scenarios, all situations of life. And it starts off with the question. You've heard it before. Is the glass half full or half empty? And I want to hear from you. Is the glass half full or half empty? And Chris, oh, we got.
It's both. I mean, it's how you look at it. I mean, you would want it to stay in the half full, but we have moments of when it can be half empty to us.
Yes. And yeah, it's a trick question, right? It is both. It's always both, no matter what you choose to look at. I mean, we all want to be half full, right? That's our goal, but I would say an even greater goal would be you're conscious. This isn't just about, hey, let's just think positive about everything, but let's be conscious. And it's really about who are you when you look at the glass. It's not about the glass. And by glass, I mean, that's any data point of life, any situation that we're looking at, something that causes you stress. Well, again, is this half full or half empty? Something that causes us anxiety, something that's happening to us, is this half full or half empty? It's always both. We just tend to emotionalize and place a lot of focus on the half empty at times, or when we do that, that's what's affecting, again, our mental fitness, our peace, our mental health. And I see Crystal's typing. And feel free to unmute yourself, Crystal, if you want to. Should be able to control your mic there. Oh, fantastic webinar. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Crystal. Thanks for joining in. So there's a tremendous value in being able to see both sides and being able to reframe, taking something that's half empty and being able to see the half full side. But it has to be authentic. This is not fake it till you make it. This isn't, hey, let's just pretend, let's just make things up, try to rationalize something. It's got to be real. And so when you look at a challenge, for example, I mentioned earlier with the stress example. Well, what could be half full about this stressor right now? Yeah, this what I'm dealing with right now. This is uncomfortable. This kind of sucks. But what am I getting from this experience? How is this in the 10 moment serving me, for my greatness? What strength am I getting out of this? And Crystal says this is a good reminder to stay focused on what is important to us, not get distracted by negativity or bad moments, which are part of life and to be expected. Yeah, 100%. Um, okay, no problem, Crystal. You're absolutely right. It's staying focused on, yeah, what's important, the things that we want, the outcomes that we want. Um, and this is why this quantum reframe tool is so very powerful, because it allows us to interrupt that pattern that we find ourselves. Like it's easy to go in a downward spiral, right? When things aren't going our way, or life's coming at us. I'll just use a personal example. Like recently, my fence blew down because we had horrendous winds here in Colorado. And this was in the midst of I'm finishing the floors in my basement. I've got all these projects. I've got a kid on the way. I've got, but our toilet ended up going on the fritz. The washer had an error code. Like it was a storm, right? It was a storm of things happening. It was an in the 10 moment. Now, okay, well, my fence being blown down, for example. Well, what the heck is half full about that? Well, the fact is, right, taking a conscious look at it, it just means the fence post was rotted, needed to be replaced, right? It's going to happen at some point. Maybe if, and this is my belief system, but if someone's looking out for me, or call it God or my guardian angels, the universe is looking out for me. Maybe they're like, he should probably get this fixed before the baby arrives, and, you know, get this taken care of. Or another perspective might be, um, all of these things happening is preparing me for the even further demands. When the kid comes, and I've got to take care of him. I got to take care of myself, paying my bills. My wife. Like the demands will increase, and maybe these things happening at once is a great strength builder, preparing me for the further demands of life. So many different ways to look at that, or talk about it, and it has to be real to you. And that's the point with not fake it till you make it, but how can you talk about this in a real, authentic way that you feel that resonates with you, that this stressful moment is actually you stress. I'm benefiting from it. This uh, thing I'm worried about. Well, what if I reframe this? What if instead of, not spilling, what if how could I pour carefully in this moment? There's so much instant power and potentiality that comes with this tool alone. The more you can see the glass for what it is and choose what side you want to emotionalize, very, very powerful. And then, we always tell a story. We're always telling a story of what's happening in our lives. This is good, this is bad, this is so, this is the end of the world, this is the greatest thing. And why do we tell those stories? Well, again, it's going to go back to what software is running, what programs are running. Am I am I really emotionalizing a half empty? Or can I associate to the half full side of the glass? And I love this quote. It's a Tony Robbins quote. The biggest reason we don't have what we want is the story we tell ourselves as to why we don't have it. You know, well, I don't have that because I'm not good enough. I don't have this. We'll justify it, but it's all an old story. And if we shift the focus, we reframe, we tell a different story, what that looks like. Some examples are, there it is, the pour carefully versus don't spill. We focus on our strengths, not where our limitations or limps are. We focus on what we do have, not what we don't have. That's very, very common one, right? Like, it's easy to overlook or underemphasize, not acknowledge all the gifts or all the things, that we're grateful for, be it, great friends and family, a roof over our heads, versus, oh, I don't have that money yet. I don't have that relationship yet. I don't have. Well, the more you talk about it and then justify, well, I don't have because of this and that, it perpetuates the reality. And we, can downward spiral, and we go to worry and anxiety versus, no, this is the adrenaline, this anxiety, same neurochemicals, by the way. This anxiety that I'm feeling, this fear that I'm feeling is adrenaline. How is that how is that actually serving me? Because we know adrenaline enhances us. It gives us strength. It makes us more powerful, makes us perform. But how many of us don't like that, don't want that feeling, hate that feeling? Adrenaline, I've never been closer to death feeling. And so many other tools. I mean, I could really go on and on. We've got a lot of other tools in the toolbox. There's over 500 of them. But these are some quick examples, and the reframing is a tool in and of itself, one of the most powerful you have. And I'll say, with this is another example. I call it the I have a dream speech. Do you have a dream for your life? Do you have a dream for, the outcomes that you want, the reality that you experience? Or, and people hear that and they say, yeah, nice tool. I don't really have, I haven't really developed that. And I'll ask, like, do, do you ever use this tool? Do you create an I have a dream for your health, your mental health, your career? Do you have that? Oh, no. Well, you do have a speech. It just turns out that for most people, it takes the form of I have a nightmare. Oh my God, I have a nightmare. What if I can't? What if it doesn't? And we emotionalize that, right? These are shifts in focus. These are shifts in stories we tell. And these all lead to an improved mental fitness. Like I said earlier, where we started, elevated levels of happiness, fulfillment, performance, everything. Um, so where do you go with all this? We're running short on time, and I appreciate all of you for being here. Where to start? Back to Mental Health America as a theme of the month, Mental Health Awareness Month. There's basic things that you see all the time. You meditate, you exercise, do things you enjoy, hobbies, get out in nature, do things that light you up, you know, and find a support system, whether that's your friends, your family, a group of a fitness group, anything, and why, this is a shameless, promotion here, but you find a coach, just as you use a personal trainer maybe to improve your physical fitness, work with a coach, whether that's with me or not, but find the resources, find the support, find someone that can help, and working through some of these very complex equations that are running, really get clear, get conscious on your own thought process, your own mindset. And so I've got a number of programs. We have group programs here. We work with you one-on-one. If you're interested, just please reach out. I'd be happy to talk that through with you, find the right program for you. But those are, to keep this really simple, things you can start doing today, and resources available to you to continue this journey of improved mental fitness. So that's all I got for content. Hope you enjoyed. Hope you got some good value out of it.